Welcome to the world famous Bitcoin Original Gangster, the show that takes no shit when it comes to SegWit. On this show, we'll be defending Bitcoin gangster style and exposing the shit in shitcoins. The idea of this show is that you ask us your questions on crypto and we'll tell you all that we know. Let's get the disclaimers out of the way. All the opinions that you hear on this show are opinion and must only ever be taken as opinion. They are never to be taken as any form of advice, family, financial, sexual or otherwise. And on that note, let's rock and roll. How are you? Thanks for coming on.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, you're coming through fine. Loud and clear.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm a bit, tired. It's 7 a.m. and I have not slept yet, but I
what?
figure, I've been trying to catch you, and so
Yeah, how come you haven't slept yet? What's going on?
well, I have a almost 3-year-old, and sometimes he gets up, like right before I'm about to go to bed, he gets up and then he wants to play all night, and then he finally went to bed, and then by the time he went to bed, I had some work I needed to finish up, and so
Wow, I could not deal with that. If I don't get my sleep, I am grumpy.
yeah. My wife's been helping a little bit, but yeah, my eyes literally feel heavy right now, but
Oh wow, well thanks for coming on and having a quick chat with me. Much appreciated.
of
You
course,
will
no
actually be
problem.
the first BTC that's been recommended to me to have a chat with.
Yeah, man, you gotta have somebody to represent the real Bitcoin on your show.
Oh well, there we go. Let's have it. Yeah. So what makes you say that BTC is the real Bitcoin?
I mean, I mean, it's the original. Um, it's the longest, or the most proof of work. Obviously, it's the only one. For example, let's just say I've been a Bitcoiner for a long time, and I've been running, Bitcoin on my computer, for example, just like Satoshi told people to run on their computer, and let's say I've been running Bitcoin on my computer for the last 7 years. Um, if I have been running Bitcoin on my computer for the last 7 years without upgrading, without touching it, without making any changes at all, um, it would be on BTC. If you try to put a BSV or a BCH on that ledger, it won't work. It'll reject it because it's not Bitcoin. It's not the original Bitcoin. Now, if I want to use BCH or BSV, I could change my software that I've been running for the last 7 years, and then it would change the rules and put me on another separate network, separate from the original Bitcoin network, that would recognize these minority chains without all the proof of work. Satoshi designed the system where you would know what the real chain was according to most proof of work, and so um, when you run that old Bitcoin client, it's going to connect to uh, uh, the BTC ledger, because that's the truthful ledger with the most proof of work. That's the way it's designed, so that you don't have to trust anybody to tell you what the real one is. You can just trust your software to connect to the one with the most proof of work. That's
Okay.
Otherwise it'd be subjective.
So but what if one of the other chains were to suddenly take off and have loads more proof of work on it?
Well, as long as they didn't change the rules, then that would be the real chain. So it has to be not only the most proof of work, but it has to be valid proof of work. So if for example, if Ethereum all of a sudden got more proof of work than Bitcoin, it wouldn't become the real Bitcoin because it's Ethereum. So it has to not only have the most proof of work, but it also has to be valid according to the rules of the network, and those rules haven't changed for the last many years.
Okay. So do you define Bitcoin by its ticker symbol then? Is that
No,
why?
I mean the ticker. Somebody could try to change the ticker. For example, let's just say the exchanges all tried to collude and they tried to say something was BTC, but it wasn't. Um, it's not impossible. I'd say it's very unlikely, but it's not impossible that, let's say, Binance could, like, maybe they want to steal people's Bitcoin, so maybe they create a fork and they say, hey, this is BTC, and you could buy it on their exchange, and the screen says you're buying BTC. But when you try to send that coin that they say is BTC and the ticker says BTC, when you try to send that to your computer, which is running Bitcoin on it, it's not going to recognize it because it's not going to build on the chain with the most proof of work that has the valid set of rules. So you would know when you try to send it that it wasn't really Bitcoin. No matter what the exchange told you the ticker was, you don't have to trust the exchange to tell you. You can verify it yourself when you send it to your computer.
Okay, so basically you define BTC by its ticker symbol because you're saying that
No,
you've been mining BTC since way back when and it's still BTC.
well, not by the ticker. I mean, that's the ticker just happens to be BTC, but if whatever my computer runs, if they change the ticker for that, then that's the new ticker. It's not because the ticker is BTC, it's because it has the most proof of work, and it's because the rules have not changed.
Okay, but what's well, yeah, the mining rules haven't changed, but in terms of the addition of SegWit and the ability for it to be a
Sure,
medium of exchange, that's changed
there have been
massively.
things added, and as far as like medium of exchange or store of value, that's just people's preference, right? Like if I like to use, for example, I like to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. I don't like to speculate and trade. I mean, I do also hold my net worth in Bitcoin, so I guess technically I'm using it as a store of value too, but that's not the for me. I mean, like just like if I were using fiat, I would store my fiat and I would use it still, but I still would have to have it to use it. So with Bitcoin, I store it because I have to have some Bitcoin in order to spend it, and then I spend it. So, but I spend whenever I buy things, I like to use Bitcoin. But as far as uh, when you say, some people look at it as a store of value, some people look at it as medium of exchange. Some people would probably just look at it as a penny stock or something like a volatile, shitty stock that they like to speculate on, um,
But
and they
what
don't even
if
care what it does.
I mean Satoshi wrote in his white paper the first line, Bitcoin a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Is that still how you see it, or do you think that should be changed?
No, of course. I think you could see it's definitely could be called a cash system. I mean, like I said, I like to use it for all my purchases, unless I just happen to have some fiat for some reason. I'll use the fiat first because I don't value it as much. But most of the time, I end up having to use Bitcoin for all of my purchases.
But a cash is the most liquid form of money, and the most liquid form of the money is the one that can be transferred the fastest. So I mean, BTC or BTC transactions can be halted at any time as soon as more than 7 transactions a second are on the
Well,
network.
well, I use the Lightning Network a lot. That's why, because obviously I'm not going to pollute the ledger with worthless transactions that people are going to have to store in their computers and their hard drives for the rest of time. My grandkids would have to keep my Uber purchase or whatever on their computer like 100 years from now. That seems very inefficient. So, and also, as you said, maybe it's 5 to 7 transactions per second. That's not very much for everybody's purchases. So, um, it's best to use technology that allows you to be more efficient without having to clog up the chain with everybody's junk and worthless, Uber
Okay.
rides.
Well, data that goes through the chain is immutable. So therefore, if it's immutable, it has value because it's truly representative. You've actually transferred it. Whereas if you're using the Lightning Network, unless the payment actually goes through something that is a registered money service business and holds a money transmitter license, it's not recognized as legal tender and therefore doesn't carry any legal protection with it. So why would any
Well,
buyers or sellers use the Lightning Network?
I don't know what you mean when you say that because I haven't seen a single case anywhere of anybody being charged for running. Like, for example, I run a Lightning Network node on my home IP address. Anybody could look it up and they can see it's AT&T, and they could even, contact AT&T and say, "Hey, this guy's running a Lightning node," because it's public. There are lots of big businesses that are currently running Lightning nodes publicly. Nobody's hiding it. It's not illegal. There's not a single piece of guidance that would suggest it's illegal. I spoke with attorneys when I heard rumors from people on the internet, on Twitter, that it would be money service transmitter, and the lawyers that I spoke to told me that they don't see any issues and there aren't any cases. So, if I started seeing people getting charged, of course, then that'd be I would be, hey, this is something real. But so far, having talked to people that I talked to, and just looking at common sense, that there's not a single person being charged, and everybody's being very open about running it. Seems to me like it's okay.
Yeah,
And
but what
then
I'm saying is that if you're conducting business and then a dispute arises in the trade, you can't invoke martial law and go to the person that you've done a trade with and put a gun to the head and say, give me that back, because obviously that's illegal. So they need to have to rely on the laws of the country to enforce the contract.
you would just sue somebody like normal
Yeah,
if
but how
if you
can
bought.
you when the value that you transfer through the Lightning Network is not recognised as legal tender? You have no reasonable
Doesn't have to
expectation.
be considered. The only thing that's legal tender is technically is fiat. But like, if we can trade rocks. I can, you can say you like my rock and that I have special and you want it, and I'll say, okay, well, give me your pogo stick for this rock,
Mhm.
and then I give you the rock and you run away and you don't give me the pogo stick. I can sue you. It doesn't have to be The rock doesn't have to be legal tender for me to sue you. It's
Yeah, but the
normal
rock has to
commerce.
have value. So, and so long as you can
It
prove
it
that the
had
rock
it
has
was part of
value,
the trade. I don't have to. The trade was, I give you this rock and you give me a pogo stick,
mm,
and you ran away and didn't give me the pogo stick, but you took my rock. So I can sue you at least for the rock back, or the court can try to make a reasonable value what they thought the rock was if you don't have the rock anymore. But at the very least, I can get the rock back. So in that case, if we're using Bitcoin, I could at least get the same amount of Bitcoin back from you
yeah. But if you're
if I
using
win the
the if
case.
you're using the Lightning Network, you don't transfer that Bitcoin until the Lightning channel is closed.
Well, what does it mean to transfer Bitcoin? Because to me, when we say we're transferring Bitcoin, what we're really doing is we're changing ownership of coin. So, if you have coin in
Yeah, but
your
that's
wallet,
just
it's
it. You're
protected
not
by,
changing coins through the Lightning Network. You're just sending an
well,
email that's got
but
no
you are
value.
changing ownership with private keys. So, like on the normal, let's say BSC. On BSC, if you have coin in your wallet and you send it to me, what's really happening is we're just changing ownership. Now, instead of your private key to send the coin, you have to have my private key to send the coin. Now I own the coin because I can move it with my private key, and you can't move it with your private key anymore. The Lightning is the same way. If I send you a coin on Lightning, I have to sign with my private key. You have to sign with your private key, and now my private key doesn't move it anymore. Only your private key can move it. To me, it's the same thing.
But
The
Lightning hasn't gone
ownership
through
has
the chain, so
changed.
therefore the data's not immutable.
It's not on a chain. You're right. So, and it's not immutable because we can all just delete our record of it, and then we'll lose our money if we do that, unless,
Well,
like you said, we settle it
how
on
can it have any
chain. But
value if that's possible?
because it's protected by real Bitcoin that you stake. So if you and I were transferring in Lightning, let's say $500, there's 500 on-chain Bitcoin that's sitting on the chain, and we can both see it and verify it, and it's protected in a multi-sig wallet by both of our private keys. But we sign essentially a contract with our private keys, an enforceable contract on chain that says $300 of this is mine and 200 is yours. So if we go to the chain and we enforce that contract, you'll get $200, I'll get $300. But let's say you want to send me $200, we make a new contract that says $500 of this coin is mine. You sign it with your private key. I sign it with my private key. Now I have the multi-sig key to access $500 of on-chain funds. All I have to do, the Lightning Network could disappear the next second, and I could still take that contract, which is essentially just a private key that you don't have, but I do, um, and take the $500, and you couldn't, because I'm the only one that can move that Bitcoin, because I'm the only one that has the private keys now, because you signed it over to me. So even though we didn't move anything on chain, we still transferred ownership in a way that was reliable because it depends on private key. And obviously, hopefully you don't have my private key. So I'm the only one that can get the money, and it has value because it's those private keys are Bitcoin private keys, and obviously Bitcoin is worth some money. So um, it's valuable. Like if I had $20,000 worth of Bitcoin on Lightning Network, it'd be worth $20,000. If you took my key from me, you could take the Bitcoin, and that's $20,000 worth of Bitcoin. It wouldn't be worthless just because it's not mutable.
But if you had $20,000 on Lightning Network and it was deleted, what would you do?
Well, just like with Bitcoin on chain, if you don't have it backed up, you'll lose it. So same with on chain. If you have a private key and then you lose it, you just lost your Bitcoin. On Lightning, it's the same, except for a little bit worse because on Lightning you don't only need your private key, but you also need a record of your transactions because you have to hold your transactions yourself since there is no miners. So you need your private key and also history of your transactions, which is called your channel state. Those two things. It's a small file, so it's not like a burdensome thing to keep. But yeah, if you lose those things, you'll lose your coins. But it's similar to Bitcoin anyway. A little bit different because you have to have a channel state. But just like with Bitcoin, if you lose the backup, you lose your coins.
All right, and so I presume so. What you're saying is basically the blockchain is essential for Lightning Network to be operational.
Yeah, because there's Bitcoin that is essentially we're trading Bitcoin, but we're doing it without moving the coin. In the same way, like have you seen the what's called an open dime?
No,
It's a
no, what's
little
that?
computer chip. It goes into a USB drive. They sell them for about $15 each. It's pretty cool, but it's like a physical Bitcoin dollar. You should Google open dime Bitcoin. It's pretty cool. Um, you can put Bitcoin on it, and then you can give it to people. So, like, let's say I want to buy a car from you in Bitcoin, and the car, let's say, is $20,000. You can put $20,000 worth of Bitcoin on the open dime. Nobody has the key to the open dime because the open dime it won't give you the key. It won't give anybody the key unless you break it with a needle. Well, if you break the circuit, then it will dump the key, but it has a light, and the light will change from like green to red to let people know that. And you can also see with your own eyes that it's been broken, and that means the key has been exposed. But assuming that nobody breaks it, and you can see that it's intact and the lights are working, then it has $20,000 on it. I can give it to you. Now you have the Bitcoin. I don't have the Bitcoin anymore because it's literally on the physical device, and you give me the car. And then later, if you want to take the Bitcoin off, you can break it, or you can use it to buy something else worth $20,000, or you can put even more Bitcoin on it and trade it to somebody else for more stuff. But I like this example because it's basically a physical um, chip that allows people to trade Bitcoin, buy things with Bitcoin on the chip by giving somebody the chip. So the Bitcoin on the chain is not moving, but the ownership of that chip with the private key inside is moving. Makes sense? So even though the Bitcoin's not moving, even though it's not immutable, even though there's no transaction trail, I don't think anybody would say that on that chip is not a real Bitcoin, um, and that the ownership isn't really changing hands because it is. I give it to you, and now it's yours. It's not mine anymore. It's Bitcoin on the chip, so it's valuable, but it doesn't move on the chain.
Okay, so if but you're still saying that the chain is essential for the
Yeah,
validation of this. Okay,
because if
so
there was no chain, then there would be no
okay,
security. There would be
so
no way to verify your money.
so how is the chain going to be economically sustained if the miners get paid for registering transactions on the blockchain and nobody's using it?
Well, I do think that in a world where everybody was using Bitcoin, I don't. First of all, or I mean Lightning, and I don't think, by the way, that everybody would use Lightning because even at 7 TPS, even if the fees are $1,000, there are still going to be a lot of people who are moving a lot of money, and they
Fees of
don't
a
care about a
thousand
thousand
dollars.
dollars. You know,
You think is that what you're gunning for? You want fees on
no,
Bitcoin to be a thousand
I'm
dollars?
just saying I'm using that as a big example to say if it were $1,000. Now, for me
So it could
personally,
be that.
I don't want the fees to be $1,000, but if it were, I'm just saying that there
Would
are
you still
certain
use it
groups
if the
of
fee
people.
was $1,000?
Yeah, there are certain groups of people that would still use it. People that are sending tens of millions of dollars around.
Is that you?
Probably, I don't. No, I'm not sending that much money around. But so I wouldn't spend $1,000 for a fee. I don't
So
even like to spend $5 for a fee, which is why I try to keep enough money on Lightning for me to do most of my stuff there. Even
how
recently,
could it be a
recently,
cash system if it's got fees that high? I mean, that's insane. I mean, you're meant to be able to go to your local grocery store and you know buy an apple or an ice cream or something like that.
I just wouldn't. I don't think it's prudent to do that on chain if you're buying an Apple because I think that the space on the chain is very valuable. I think that and even BSVer, I think should feel the same. And not, I mean, I know that you don't think you think it's worth it to put an Apple on chain. That's fine, but I would think that even you would think though that uh, we shouldn't try to put more data than we need to on the hard drive because I
Well,
mean
BSV
it's
thinks
just
that the whole
wasteful,
world
right?
should run on chain. But BSV seems, from what I've been told, BSV says everything that is digital, the entire world's, the global, anything that's digital will be on chain. Because at the
I've
moment,
heard that, yeah.
anything like digital data that businesses keep, they keep in multiple sources. Because if you're a financial institution and you lose a customer's records, you can be sued, you can be fined, you'll be publicly humiliated. Customers will
All
lose
right, of course,
confidence, share
but they should
prices
keep
will
a backup
drop. So
somewhere.
yeah, but I mean, they spend loads on backing up their data, which requires virus software, cybersecurity, staff,
Well,
spaces, and all that. It's just going to be if you just simply put everything on chain. The moment you put that digital data on chain, it's immutable forever. So they think everything should go on chain, and that people and that corporations will be buying Bitcoin
so
in order
the
to
difference
upload the
to me
data to the chain.
The difference to me, there's a few things, and I don't know how if you want to go down this path or do you want to continue talking what we were talking about. But I'm happy to talk about what I feel about everything going on chain, which is I just feel like first of all it's very inefficient. For example, if I'm Netflix and I host all my Netflix movies on chain, that's actually okay. That's fine, but I not only have to store all my Netflix movies, but I also have to store all Hulu's movies, and I also have to store the grocery store's ledger, and I also have to store the other 200 grocery stores' ledgers, and I also have to store all the porn sites, and I also have to store, everybody buying apples, and I also have to store like I'm Netflix, but
But
now I have to not only back up my own
what's wrong with
stuff,
that?
I have to have everybody in the world's stuff, and everybody else in the world has to have all my stuff and everybody else's stuff. It's very inefficient. We're basically going
Well,
to
how come it's inefficient? I mean, like it's the
because the
blockchain
way we
is
would do it so
unlimited
so what
storage.
you're saying is it'll be cheaper somehow, and I don't think it will be,
Yeah, through
to
economies of scale.
to re to store everything more, because everybody has to store everybody's stuff, than it is for somebody just to back up their own stuff. That doesn't make sense. You still need the same amount of security. It's not like it becomes
Yeah, but if
magical
people are
when
backing
you
up
store
their
it on a
own
BSC
stuff on
hard
their own
drive compared
servers,
to
the servers can be corrupted and they can be lost and they can catch fire
yeah,
and
but so
whatever.
can the BSV servers too. Like,
Yeah, but
so
it's a distributed ledger, so it doesn't matter if one burns down or one gets lost. You've got others to back it up.
you can so for example, um, nobody gets paid to, and I always get different answers when I ask this question. Nobody gets paid to hold the data. So if I'm not going to store I don't want to store all of Netflix data and everybody's data because I'm going to have to pay for all that hard drive space. And if I'm a miner, I don't get paid to store everything. I just get paid to process new blocks. Once that block has been processed and I get my reward and I take the fees, I don't get paid for that block anymore.
When you're
We're going
moving
to
and
have
sharing data, that's a transaction online that gets mined, that miners get
right.
paid for.
So you get paid for it one time if you're lucky enough to be the one to mine it, and that's it. Let's say, for example, 5 years from now, let's just say everybody's on BSV today, and the whole world is using it for storage, and I want to mine BSV, or I
But
don't even want to
storage
mine it.
and
I just want
sharing.
to
So
use
sharing
it.
requires transactions of the data.
Now I have to download all these terabytes or petabytes of data but I'm not going to
Why
get
do you have to
paid for
download
that.
them? You can just view them on chain.
Well, but then I'm trusting somebody.
Trusting? How do you mean trusting somebody?
Well, because if I'm not verifying the data for myself, then I'm trusting somebody else that they verified it for me, and that's
Yeah, but
goes
you can
against the
see the
point of Bitcoin.
verification on chain.
No, because you can. If I tell you I verified it, how do you know I verified it unless you verified yourself?
Well,
You
you
just have
can
to
see
trust
when
me
the
that
data
I
was
verified.
first uploaded because everything's timestamped on the blockchain.
No, but I mean, I could lie. If you're trusting
Yeah, but you
my
can't lie
Block
because
Explorer, I can.
you can see everything on chain.
No, oh, you're looking at a Block Explorer. The Block Explorer guy that runs that website can make that website say whatever he wants. Now you have to hope that there's more than one of them, and then you go to another one and say, well, this other Block Explorer says something totally different.
But you can see when the transaction was initially made and also who made it and where it came from.
Yeah, but you can put anything you want there. If you own the Block Explorer, I can build a Block Explorer right now and say exactly when I sent something, exactly from what address, create a whole history, and it'll all be fake. And
But why
you
would you do
just
that?
look. There's a lot of reasons why people fake things. Why
Yeah,
does
but surely
corruption exist?
if you're
The
faking
world is a
something,
corrupt place.
you're faking the original data because it's the original data that people wouldn't want to see, or it's the original
You
data
can put
that a
whatever
person
you want.
wouldn't want
It's
you to see.
if it's just your website, like a Block Explorer, you can make your website say whatever you want. That's the point, and that's one of the problems that Bitcoin solves, is that in the past and for all of human history, corruption has existed. Corruption exists, liars exist, thieves exist, people who want to trick you exist. And so there needed to be a system that everybody could verify for themselves and wouldn't have to trust anybody. Um, that way, we cut right through all of the corruption, all of the lying, all of the trickery, and we can see for ourselves, not just by looking at somebody's computer that we don't have any association with, but by verifying it ourselves on our own computers and checking every signature and seeing that everything is valid, all the way back to the very first transaction, which is what everybody that uses Bitcoin does today, and that's how we know that it is true, that it's valid.
Okay, yeah. So that's an interesting point there. So you just mentioned about checking the signatures to make sure transactions are valid.
Mhm.
What about this SegWit? So they've segregated the witnesses so that the signatures cannot validate each other anymore.
Well, they do. It's just you have to have SegWit software in order to see the signature. If you have the legacy software, you won't see the signature, so you'll just include it in a block.
So do you
Um,
have to buy that software from Blockstream?
no, you just have to. It's open source, just like the other software. So it's just an update basically to the Node software. It's still open source. It's still, anybody can go download on SourceForge or anywhere where you can download, Node software. It's licensed with the same license, which is an open license. You could copy it and put
So
your name on it, even.
what's the point of SegWit?
Well, for one thing, it's a block size increase, so you should love it.
Block
Um,
size increase? A block size
it
increase?
is. It is a block size increase
Well,
to the.
but I mean, the other chains, BCH and BSV have massively increased their block sizes.
Sure, I know. But SegWit also is a block size increase, so you should support that because you love block size increases. I'm kind of
Yeah, but
halfway
they've
joking,
had to
but halfway
segregate the
serious.
signatures in order to do it. Why don't you
Huh?
just keep the chain of signatures so they can validate each other?
Well, because they wanted to be backward compatible. So the way that SegWit did it, because like I said, if you were running a Bitcoin node for the last 7 years on your computer, if you're running a Bitcoin network for the last 7 years, you wouldn't have to upgrade anything, and you'd still see the same chain. If they changed the consensus to essentially change the block size without making it compatible with the original rules, then they would have to fork it, and all the old clients would have to change. And in that case, probably, Bitcoin is very hard to change. So um, most of the users probably would have just kept running the Bitcoin network and ignored the big blockchain, which is actually kind of what happened when BCH forked. Most people ignored it and kept running normal Bitcoin. That's why the original Bitcoin kept its value, and the BCH one was worth fractions of the original's value because nobody was running it, and they weren't really recognizing it. Um, and they had changed the software. Now, if BCH had been the original software, and didn't require a change. And if the BTC one, they call BTC today, if that one required a change, then it would have been worth much less and it wouldn't be recognized, even if it kept the same ticker, even if they let BTC, let's say Blockstream made a change, a rule change that required a fork, and let's say Blockstream was the fork, and BCH said no, fuck your fork. Sorry, can I cuss?
It's all right. Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it. I
I
mean,
don't mean to.
I don't think there'll be many kids listening to this.
Screw your fork. We're going to maintain the original Bitcoin, and we're not going to fork. We're not going to change our software. We're going to stay on the original one. Then even though, let's say all the exchanges love Blockstream and they all want to kiss Blockstream's ass, so they say, hey, Blockstream, we're going to call your coin BTC, Bitcoin, and we're going to call this this other one BCH, even though they're the original one. Even if they did that, um, users like me would have stayed with what they call now BCH because it would be the one that didn't change. And Blockstream would be the fork because they would have changed their rules and required you to change your stuff because it wouldn't be backwards compatible anymore. And I wouldn't want that. That's not Bitcoin anymore. So I would stick with the original one and follow that chain, no matter what they put the ticker as.
Okay. So do you think that BSV calling themselves Satoshi's vision is not Satoshi's vision because they claim to be following Satoshi's instructions in the white paper?
Well, right, and the biggest reason is because I don't believe that Craig Wright is Satoshi, and they say it's Satoshi's vision, but if you read like Craig's blog posts, he says he's Satoshi, and he is also the head. Was he chief scientist or
Something
engineer
like
at
that.
nChain?
Yeah, yeah.
And so nChain is the company that essentially owns BSC and all the patents that are in BSV. So he basically is in control of BSV, and so it's his vision, and he says he's Satoshi, so it's called Satoshi's vision. So it's basically Craig's vision. I think most
Well,
people
who
should
who is
admit
it who
that.
added segregated witness to BTC?
I don't remember who did it
Because
particularly.
surely they own BTC. They
No,
can do
I
whatever
mean
they
because
want. They control it. They can do whatever they want to it.
Bitcoin stayed the same. It stayed the legacy chain is still BTC.
Yeah, but it's
You
got
can,
SegWit
if you
on
don't
it.
like, if a person doesn't like SegWit, they don't have to use it. They don't have to put any of their coins on it. They can keep their coin on the legacy addresses, and they can say screw SegWit. I don't like SegWit, and they have and some people do. I think there's still more than 10%. I'm not sure,
But
but I think
was the whole
there's
point of SegWit to increase the block size? Is that what you're saying?
no. It was the biggest point I think was to add the mailability fix, and which was allowed to get Lightning now, which is why
What's
we're
the
able.
malleability fix? What's that?
So the legacy chain wasn't able to um, uh, well, this is me being tired right now. So
That's all right.
um, they basically the simple version is Lightning doesn't work because unless you can each transaction has to be able to be um, well, I'm still being too in my mind. I'm creating this, making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Oh no,
Um,
believe me, there are loads of other people having the same problems that you've got.
well, I mean, well, you can just Google mailability fix if you need the technical answer. It's easy to find.
Well, can
But
you just
basically,
explain it for any listeners, like right now, just sort of quickly?
uh, hold on, malfix segwit. Um, I've heard some good explanations of it before. But the simple reason for your listeners, if you want the more advanced reason, just Google
Just a simple one will be
Bitcoin
alright.
malleability Bitcoin. But if you want the simple reason,
Yeah.
Lightning doesn't work without it. So it was a change that if you're not running a SegWit node, you can't run Lightning. So if you want to stay on a legacy Bitcoin node, you can't run Lightning on it.
Okay, so
That's
the
the simple reason.
legacy, the legacy BTC chain won't scale without SegWit because they need the Lightning Network to scale, which requires it.
Well, if you consider scaling to be, allowing people to do a bunch of cheap coffee transactions, yeah, and I only mention that because some people don't even consider that to be a problem. Some people like to use legacy chain. They don't like to use SegWit. They don't like to use Lightning, and they don't consider 5 TPS to be a problem. They think that Bitcoin is just fine like that. I'm not one of those people. Those people do exist. There are people out there. They hate Lightning. They hate SegWit, but they only use BTC and they stay legacy.
Well, so I was under the impression that I mean, because Satoshi said, well, he's designed it as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So a cash system just means that effectively it was designed to solve the problems with fiat currency and the fact that fiat currency has a central point of control. The central banks inflate it into infinity, as we're seeing at the moment with this $6 trillion quantitative easing printing, which
Mhm.
devalues the money that people have got in their account. Whereas if they're using a medium of exchange that is divisible rather than inflatable, it just means that now you're actually using a medium of exchange that behaves in the same way that gold used to, in the fact that
Mm.
gold can be a store of value in the
I
fact
mean,
that
make it good money.
it maintains its value.
The way I like to think of it is, it just makes it good money. So,
But good
um,
money is
you
surely
know,
a medium of exchange that can be used for
yeah.
conducting
I mean,
trade.
but really, when I say good money in this context, what I mean is, if we lived in a society and we needed to find something that we could use as money, um, we wouldn't want to use sand because it's very easy to find sand. So that would be bad money.
There's an
People could
infinite
just,
supply of it almost.
yeah, people would just get all the
It's not
sand they
scarce
want,
enough.
and it'd be a horrible money. So we'd say this is a bad money.
Hmm.
Um, if we found a stone, a certain stone that was nice, we could say this. If anybody has these stones, this could be money,
Like
and
want
that could
them.
work unless there was too many of those stones, of course, like sand, then it wouldn't work. Um, and that's why people settled on gold for so long because gold was easily identifiable and it was pretty rare. So people couldn't just go get a bunch of it. And if they could, then they earned it. They were considered to be rich. Um, and so that would be good money. Gold, in that sense, would be good money. But in the modern age, of course, we do a lot of international trade and things like that. And gold has become very expensive.
Well,
So
also
uh,
you can't transfer gold digitally.
right, so it becomes, not as good money. I'd still say it's pretty decent money. And for a small community, gold could be good money if it wasn't so valuable, maybe. But I mean, anyway, it's
Yeah,
getting
but
too many
that requires
hypotheticals there. But
physical contact, doesn't it? If you're trading in
yeah,
gold, and then
but so Bitcoin, it's a good money because it has the scarcity. It's secure. Nobody can counterfeit it. You can trust the supply is 21 million. You can trust the rules and how it works. So in that sense, it's good money. Now, of
yeah, but
course, you
only a
could say,
small community can use it because it only. I mean, like at the moment, 7 transactions a
well,
second
sure,
wouldn't
you could say
service my local
it's
supermarket.
it could be in that sense, and that's probably why some people compare it to gold. Uh, it's good money, but it's hard to use, or let's say not hard to use, expensive to use. So good money, great money, but without any extra technology, too expensive for a lot of things to use, not practical to use because it's just too expensive,
So
and
it's
that's
not a
just a
cash
property
system.
of that money. It has inherent properties, and some of them emerge from its use case. So in this, for example, it just became so popular that um, its giant block size of 1 megabyte became full, and so you have to bid for space, and that's too expensive for many purposes, and so it prices out a lot of uses.
So wouldn't somebody just simply design a better system that could work?
Well, a lot of people try, and it's been happening probably since 2011 or 2000, even 10 maybe. One of the first people to start speculating about new coins was Dan Larimer. He's right there. If you ever get bored and you read all the old Bitcoin Talk posts, just go to Bitcoin Talk and click on like the earliest one. Literally, just go to the page one, and you'll see Dan Larimer right there on the first page in the first few topics already trying to say, hey, Satoshi, what if we did this? I think I could make a better coin if we do this and this and this. And of course, we know now that has since then made lots of new coins because he keeps thinking he can make something better.
He keeps. How come he's making lots of coins and not like sticking with one?
Because he keeps having new ideas.
Well, I would say the issue there though is that money has to be neutral. So therefore, if anything has a centralized starting point, like if Dan Lerma just started something himself, that's nothing that America and China couldn't just simply replicate themselves. So
they could, and they could even, they could copy. China could take BSV code. Now, granted, you guys have patents, but China doesn't have to care about a patent. It's China. They can do what they want to do. So they could take the BSV code and run it and say, hey, you like BSV? Here it is. We're going to run it.
And then America would never use it.
Yeah, most of us wouldn't use it. I don't think you would use it. I wouldn't use it. And then I wouldn't use it because.
So then we're back to square one with multiple currencies, which is basically fiat currency, because you've only got America using their digidollar and China using their was it RMB, whatever it is they use.
Mm-hmm. So and that's one of the reasons why people are you familiar with Nouriel Roubini?
Yes, yeah.
One of his arguments against Bitcoin, when people say that Bitcoin is scarce and has a 21 million cap, he basically says bullshit. You can make unlimited Bitcoins all you want. There's already a bunch of Bitcoins and there's no scarcity at all. Everybody just makes their own coins and it's worthless. That's basically his argument.
Okay, well, I guess what he's failing to recognize there is the fact that sorry, 2 seconds. What he's failing to recognize there is that Bitcoin, nobody knew who Satoshi Nakamoto was when it was created. And so therefore the starting point was decentralized, because even though it started, nobody knew actually who started it. So therefore the network has grown for a period of 10 years without anybody, without that central point of authority having any influence or control or authority over the growth of the network. And that's what neither America or China can simply replicate overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's grown organically. And that's
right.
where the value of the Bitcoin network fundamentally lies.
I think that is I think that's where it gets a lot of its I think another way of saying that is, people recognize, so because you make a good point there. It's not just about the properties, because if it were just about the properties, we could just fork the exact same thing and run the exact same thing and then say, hey, it has the same properties. But nobody would value it, and that's because
I suppose thinking about it, an example would be if Vitalik created Ethereum, then he got hacked and he rolled back the chain, everyone got their money back, they felt happy. So he's not really created anything that China couldn't simply replicate themselves and then insist that all their citizens use it, and then you've got a coin that very quickly takes on the market cap of $12.5 trillion, which is their GDP. But again, China, America would never use it. And I mean, we're back to square one with fiat currencies with a centralized point of control that it is difficult to exchange, and they don't have any value outside of their closed economic area. So if China created a digital currency, it wouldn't have any value outside of China. So therefore,
I think it would have the same value as the RMB if they tied it to the RMB. So, because I do think all fiat currencies are going to be digital in the next 20 years. I think it's a no-brainer because, cash paper money is expensive and it's really hard to prevent counterfeiting. I'm almost convinced that, probably a double-digit percentage of all cash is probably fake, and probably really, really good fake that nobody can detect without the serial number. And how often is the Fed checking serial numbers on bills? So
if people are going to be using this digital dollar, what use would BTC have?
Because, like you said, it's neutral and nobody controls it. So if we made a digital,
it costs a fortune to transact.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter for some people. Some people value what
Yeah,
it
but only
does.
only for a very small group of people, and then it can only then it can only handle 7 transactions a
Well,
second.
whoever could afford it. So, and this problem was in Satoshi's design. So when he designed it, he knew that maybe it would get a lot of use, and maybe it wouldn't, and he couldn't think of a way to fairly distribute who could use it. And the best way to do it is with game theory and the fee market. So, for example, in your example, let's say, oh, it's too expensive. Well, it's a market, so it's like saying that BSV is too expensive right now. Just the coin itself. If I said BSV is too expensive right now, it shouldn't be worth $200, $300, whatever it's worth. If I just say that, okay, why would I want to use a BSV if it's worth $300? It's too expensive, but it's a market. So the market said, I want to pay $300 for this BSV. That means it's worth $300. And if not enough people think it's worth $300, then somebody will say, okay, I'll sell you a BSV. I don't want it anymore for $299. And if somebody buys it, now it's worth $299. If they don't, maybe it's worth $298, and on and on and on. So Bitcoin's the same way. If somebody's paying $1,000 fee, it's because that's what it's worth. So people are fighting over block space, and to get on that block, if it costs you $1,000, then it costs $1,000 because people are paying $1,000. Otherwise, if too many people think it's too expensive, they don't pay $1,000, and now it's $999. But whatever the number is, it's only that because that's what people are paying. So it's not made up. It's not.
That's things though.
It's,
That sounds like supply and demand. I mean, that's
it
competition.
is.
So
It's
surely,
fine.
surely a better system will just simply come along and outcompete that in no time.
Uh, I think it's pretty good. But sure, it's possible that if somebody could make a better system, it would outcompete it.
Wait, you don't
Um,
think anybody will be able to make a better system that doesn't charge $1,000 or $10,000 for a transaction?
but again, it doesn't charge that. It's just that's what it's worth if that's what people are paying.
Yeah, but
And if
surely people would only pay that if they didn't have a choice, because that's supply and demand. Whereas
they have a
where
choice, because
you,
they could use, for example, they could use BSV if they want a cheaper transaction.
well, I mean,
They
that's
could.
what the BSV community are telling me. Yeah, yeah, and it makes sense in my mind. So it's kind of like I'm looking for arguments against. But you've
I
just
mean,
agreed with them.
yeah, but the thing is, because we can look at the reality now and we can say, well, are they using BSV? No, they don't. They still use BTC because they value something about BTC that BSV doesn't have, and
What?
they're willing to pay.
What would that be?
For one, it doesn't have end chain controlling it.
Yeah, but
It
it
has
sounds like it's got Blockstream controlling it because they added Segwit.
Blockstream doesn't have any control over it at
Well,
all.
how was
Not in the
Blockstream?
same
How
way.
was Segwit added?
It's through, I mean, people like me and the entire
What, you added Segwit?
Bitcoin community. Yeah, well, so my current node, that because I have a Lightning node, so my Lightning node has to run SegWit.
So was it not Blockstream that created Lightning Network?
Lightning Labs is a separate company, but Lightning Network is also open source, so there are a lot of people working on their own implementations now.
So it's Lightning
Um,
Labs that sort of own
so I'm
Lightning
running
Network.
I'm running LND,
And so,
which
BTC doesn't scale without Lightning Labs
depends on what
authority
you want to
to
use it for.
develop
If
Lightning Network.
it scales just fine if you're one of those people that doesn't mind paying whatever it
Well, there's
costs to
going to be a
send
lot of
right now.
people that mind paying. I mind paying.
Sure, and the market will reflect that. So if too many people don't want to pay, then it becomes cheaper because
But
that's just,
what if a lot of people want to use it, but then they can't because of the fees? They're just going to find an
then they
alternative.
won't want to use it, right? Like there'll be a person who doesn't want to use it, and then they won't use it, and the price will reflect that.
Yeah,
Of the
well,
price
yeah,
of the
yeah.
fees will reflect that.
So they're gonna find an alternative solution to the problem that they've got. There's a service that they
Sure,
want to
if
use
they
that they
don't,
can't afford to use.
if something else suits their needs better, then of course that's what they'll use. That's just how people are. I think we both agree.
Well, do you not
So they
think that
can.
that's what Satoshi had in mind? I mean, like he's his. I mean, from what I've read about on his white paper, he's designed a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, for the world, for everybody. He
It's
wasn't
for
saying
whoever
this is a
wants to use it.
he wasn't saying this is a peer-to-peer cash system for the rich only.
No, and because for people like me who don't want to spend, of course, right now the fees are pretty cheap, but
Yeah, because no one's
they
using
could
it.
they could get. Let's just see what they actually are right now. So yeah, right now you can get into a block probably for Bitcoin wise as cheap as BSV for 1 Satoshi per byte. It's as cheap as it gets, unless you want to, use special clients that have lower minimums. But we saw even on BSV when I think it was Roy when he submitted a bunch of data at less than a Satoshi byte fee. Nobody minded. So let's just call 1 Satoshi per byte the minimum, even though technically it's not.
Mhm.
So you could, you know, do a BTC transaction for the same price, except the fact the coins cost different price, but the same price in Bitcoin. One Satoshi of BSV or 1 Satoshi of BTC would get you a transaction through on the BTC network right now. But that's why I use Lightning, because on days sometimes the ledger is busy and you see there's like 18 blocks worth of data pending.
So do people
Um,
have to check the state of the chain before they decide how they send their transactions
well,
on
you don't have
BTC?
to. You can use your wallet if you are like a low information person and you just want to, just trust your wallet. It's fine, but I do because I'm a more uh, technically minded person. I like to be in control of the things that I do
But
and
what
make
if you're
good
not
decisions.
particularly tech savvy, and you just want to go down to the shops and buy
Well,
a chocolate bar?
if you have Bitcoin, if Bitcoin is your money, because let's say maybe you get paid in it and you want to buy, and you like to do things like buy chocolate bars, um, you'd probably be using Lightning Network. And right now, there are wallets. If you want, while we're talking, you can download one, and I can send you some Bitcoin on it.
So
And
you could use Lightning Network as an alternative, but Lightning Network is owned by Lightning Labs.
well, no, I mean, anybody, you could fork Lightning and make your own Lightning client, and it would still be compatible with everybody else on the network.
So how do
So
Lightning Labs make their money?
I don't know. That's a good question. And I've asked them.
Well, I mean,
I've
they've
asked
got to
them
be funded
before.
by they've got to be funded by a
Well,
central
so I
source of
think what
some
they're going
sort.
to be doing is they're creating. I still don't like their answer, but they're creating services on top of. I actually asked Elizabeth Stark this question. She's the CEO of Lightning Labs, and they're creating services like, for example, there's a service they're making right now called Loop. So it's called Loop. Some BTCers are going to listen and laugh at me if I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm
That's all right. We'll
very.
just get them to
Um,
call in. Let's have a chat with them if they laugh at you. That's what we're here
but
for. Do you know what I mean? We got to get to the bottom of this stuff.
so there's a Loop technology called Loop on Lightning, and Loop is something they're going to charge for, and they're going to make other
So
value-added
what
services
does Loop
that
do?
they're going to charge for. Loop lets people send on-chain Bitcoin into Lightning channels and off. So let's say if you were a merchant um, and you had a lot of people paying you on Lightning, um, and you wanted that money to be off-chain instead of on-chain, you would use Loop, and it would take the on-chain money and automatically turn it into off-chain money for you, trustlessly, and you'd pay a fee
Off-chain
to.
money.
I mean, so Lightning is off-chain, and then on-chain is the what you're used to. So you could, as a merchant,
So on-chain
for
would be
example,
safer for storing money.
yeah, and for storage you need it to be off-chain. So if I'm a merchant and I get lots of people sending me on-chain money, I
Okay.
mean
But if
off-chain
you
money.
but if you're storing your money off-chain, and you've already said that that's not immutable, so that can be deleted.
No, no, off. So you don't store off-chain, you store on-chain. Whenever you want to like keep money for long term, you put it in an off-chain. I mean, sorry, confusing the two. In an on-chain wallet because that's where it's most secure and easiest to store. Um,
Okay. So you do
so
need storage on-chain effectively.
yeah, for if I'm a store, just like that's your vault. So like in a normal store, once they get enough cash in the drawer, they put it in the vault, and they just leave a little bit of cash in the register for change and things like that.
Okay. So
But
basically, you have to. So Lightning Labs are charging people to secure the money that they've got because they don't want to keep it on Lightning Network.
this is something that people could do themselves if they were technical. But just like with Linux, Linux is free, but companies like Red Hat create entire services for industry and the industry pays for those services because it's cheaper and more convenient for them to pay experts to implement these things into their systems than it is for them to hire teams that could create these systems themselves and manage these systems themselves. And so I think that Lightning Labs wants to be uh, kind of like providing those services for companies. So in a world where everybody is using Lightning, if every grocery store is using Lightning, the grocery store is not going to want to have a team of people that know how Lightning works very well, right? They're just going to want it to work. Their employees don't need to be tech experts. Their employees are just employees for a grocery store. They don't need to know how to do all this technical stuff. So
So they can pay
Lightning
for it
Labs,
instead.
yeah, they'll have tools that they can charge those
All right.
stores.
Right. I mean,
But
it
users
just.
like
I mean,
me,
if you're charging for those types of services, surely that's like devaluing the system itself. Because someone's just like, well, that's just another cost I've got to endure.
I mean, yeah, it makes it more expensive if you have to pay
I mean, what
for
if you're the
services.
thing is though, what if you're a huge multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation? So I suppose you would employ staff to be doing that. Instead of it would be cheaper to employ staff to pay to
I mean, at a certain
technical
scale, yeah. If you
savvy
were a really
people to
big
do that.
company, you might hire your own people to manage your own stuff.
But then
Especially if,
you would have to trust that staff member to transfer that money without skimming off the top somewhere.
uh, right, and we're talking about Bitcoin still, so it's still able to be traced. Even the off chain is able to be traced if you own it, um, because you
Oh,
have
okay.
access to all the channels. So it's easier to
So
track
if it
than
can be traced,
yeah.
I mean, what about this narrative that blockchain seem to be spinning about censorship-resistant money that nobody can take if everything can be traced?
So you yourself, so of course we all know that on Bitcoin everything is easy to trace because the ledger is public. So whether BSC or BTC, the ledger is public. Every transaction you do is on the ledger forever. And of course people do coin joins, but apart from that, with Lightning, it's a little bit harder to trace. Well, it's a lot harder to trace for other people, but it's not harder to trace for yourself.
But Lightning can be
So,
deleted.
huh?
Like the Lightning network can be deleted because
Um,
it's not immutable data.
sure. I mean, but to each individual miner, they could also delete their own Bitcoin data. They just hope that somebody else holds it, and because that's how it works. Everybody, not everybody, but hopefully as many people as possible are keeping a copy of that data. That's part of the security of the Bitcoin network. On Lightning, it's more peer to peer. It's more peer to peer than normal Bitcoin. So you're in charge of your own data, and only you and your peers. So if me and you are sending money, then me and you are in control of that data ourselves. And if we delete it, then it's deleted. Because we're just two peers.
So what if somebody got hold of it? And like you had a staff member in your business who you had a falling out with, and they got hold of it, and they were just simply able to delete your Lightning wallet.
So there's tools already like right now. So for one thing, of course, you'd have a backup because you can back it up just like you back up your BSC wallet. So you keep your private keys somewhere, maybe in a safe or wherever you keep your private stuff, and you have a backup of the channel state, probably in a Google Drive or whatever. Um, and there's also another way to do it. It's called a static channel backup, where you can back up without having to back up every time. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into the
Yeah, no.
stuff.
Well, this has been quite interesting because I mean, all the comparisons that we've spoken about here are comparable to BSV. Like we've not mentioned BCH at all.
Mm.
Do you have
Um,
any opinion on BCH? Like just while we're at it.
well, I mean, so it's really Chinese are taking control of it or trying to almost successfully.
Oh, you mean like
ABC
Jihan
is
and Bitmain?
basically ABC has basically become very corrupt. Um, they're trying to put taxes on the blocks.
So they would basically control that. That would be their. Well, they yeah. I
They
mean,
have,
that's
yeah. I
centralizing
mean,
control of the
they've
network.
basically proven that they have, or tried to prove, they've tried to take control. They made the changes to pay themselves and their friends, but the community rejected it, and they're making a separate node software. We'll see if they are successful or not. Um, but it's just a mess. And then you know, most of they're in a place right now where they have no purpose because if you look in their roadmap, they say they want to have gigabyte blocks, but their blocks are smaller than BSVs. Um, it's just they have what is BCH best at? I guess the only thing that BCH does better than BSV right now is maybe the token ecosystem. I know technically you can have tokens on BSV, but there really isn't anything that people actually use on BSV for tokens right now. Whereas on BCH, they have a pretty healthy, at least within their own community, token ecosystem. It's easy to send these tokens around, and the wallets are building tools for the tokens, and it works, pretty good. I don't like those kind of things generally because you have to have BCH to send them, but supposedly they're also going to fix that problem. I don't know. I have to see it for myself to where you don't have to have BCH to send tokens. In a perfect world, you could send me 10 tokens and I could have a wallet with just those 10 tokens in it and never even have to think about BCH, you know? And then I could send you tokens of my 10 tokens and it would just work. And I wouldn't have to go buy a separate token, BCH, to send you my first token. It's kind of stupid in my opinion.
Do you think? I mean, I can see the value in tokens, but only if they. Well, a utility token is a closed market, so it's effectively like a voucher, a discount voucher for whoever it is that's created it, trying to get people to use their product. They'd be like, oh, buy our token and get a like Binance do, get 50% discount on your fees.
I mean, all the
Or it
tokens
could.
are mostly worthless. I mean, the tokens are just really good marketing tools for businesses, in my opinion. Like, if I'm an exchange, I'm going to make a token so that hopefully I can get some more investment from the community. And that's great for the exchange because they might raise millions of dollars. And maybe it's good for the community, maybe not, depending on how the exchange manages the utility. For example, Binance with their token, they did it in a smart way where they did buybacks periodically. So buyback and burn. So after I forget the time frame, but after every period of time, they would buy back a certain percentage of their tokens with their own money, profits from the exchange operation, and then they would destroy those tokens so that all the tokens left in circulation became more valuable. And they did this many times, and the token was worth less than $1, and then went worth over $30, and it was good in that case for both Binance and the community because everybody benefited from that, and that was a smart model. But there are also a lot of exchanges that try to do similar things and they end up being completely worthless
Well, also, I
because
mean, I suppose if Binance got shut down, that token immediately drops to zero.
yeah, you're right because its utility is tied to the exchange.
Yeah.
Um,
So those kind of tokens are like they're centralized. Almost like securities, really, because they're issued by a centralized
yeah, I mean,
source.
so I think that probably the SEC would consider it a security, probably, but they don't care. Binance doesn't care.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm sure the holders will care when it gets shut down, but Binance will probably do a runner by then. So basically, it's an exit scam, pretty much, waiting to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a I like seeing that in a way because
What exit
um,
scams?
I like seeing so some of these companies they're pushing the limits of the law in ways that I can understand in some cases. Now, obviously, some people are just trying to scam, and obviously, those people need to be put in prison, and the laws in that case are merited. But then there are companies that push the law that are just trying to do things in a better way, that think they can do it in a way that doesn't hurt anybody. For example, Uber. Uber was against the law in many places in the world because in many places you had to have a license to be a taxi.
Mm.
You had to register as a taxi driver, and Uber basically just ignored all the taxi regulation and just pretended like they weren't taxis, even though it
Yeah,
kind
because
of
they're
is the
they're
same
private
exact thing as a
hire.
taxi.
Yeah, but they're private
Yeah.
hire.
and they basically just were so big so fast that they couldn't be enforced against. And then by the time they tried to enforce against them, like in New York, um, they were big enough to put up a big legal battle and essentially win. So
Yeah,
in
but
that case,
also
I
there.
think
I mean, Uber are private. There's a difference between having a taxi license and a private hire license. Like a private hire is just simply you hiring a private driver for your journey. That's that
well,
like
and that
like
they used, they used whatever they could to make it legal, but the states, in many cases, like for example New York, did try to sue them and say it was illegal, and they had to fight in court to prove, to not prove, but to make the argument that won, judge and jury over, so in order to be able to operate. Because the way law is, it's always a matter of opinion, and you have to make your case, and that's why lawyers exist. So, um,
Yeah,
but
thing is though that's like that's changing the market. That's using technology to improve the market. So whereas taxis are allowed to
and
like
that's
park up and
what I
pick
think
people
that
off the
Binance would
streets.
say they're doing. Now, of course, a lot of people would disagree, but a lot of people hate Uber too. Especially the taxi drivers. Taxi drivers hate Uber. But, um, and even some people. Not too many people hate Uber, but some people do. Just because it screws the taxi drivers. But
Well,
a
yeah,
lot
but
of
I mean,
people would say,
Uber is a like businesses are service providers. If it was a crap service, people wouldn't use it, and it just simply
and
wouldn't
I
exist. The reason it's
and,
successful is because people like the service that it provides.
and people would say the same about Binance. It's a place where you can exchange digital currencies. Now, the SEC would say, hey, some of these things are securities, and if you want to trade securities, you need a broker's license, you need Series 7, you need all these hurdles that we put in place to, for securities. And if you don't get these things, then you're running an illegal business.
Mm.
But Binance says, well, you won't give us those things. This technology is too new. It doesn't fit inside the box that you want us to fit into. And so we have two choices. Either we don't provide the service at all because it doesn't fit into your box, or we do it anyway and provide a service that a lot of people want and need if you're doing that.
But what does the service
And
do?
in the case of Binance, it allows people to trade digital assets.
But what are these digital assets at the moment? I mean, or at the moment, there is not a single coin or token that actually does anything.
I mean, well, that's a little too harsh, and I don't mean to defend shitcoins, but um, just to be devil's advocate, there's stuff like Decentraland for the VR thing, and I don't think any of this stuff's necessary. I think we could do without all of it, but it exists, and some people like to play in those games and to go in the virtual world or whatever and play the Decentraland thing, and
Yeah, but they don't
other
need an
people,
exchange to do that, though, do they?
well, they need a place to buy the token.
It doesn't have to
Um,
be through Binance. I mean, surely the creators of the token itself could just issue them.
yeah, but then they get in trouble with the SEC themselves because,
Oh, well, they need to register then, don't they?
but then you can't use. See, this is a hard because when they
And
design
surely if they're taking
security
money from
laws,
people or people are giving them money and there's a business involved, I mean, customers need protection. So
it
it's
gets
right
it
that they should
gets
be
it gets
regulated.
hairy because you know is a WoW Gold a security? And most people would say no. WoW Gold, if you play World of Warcraft, the currency in that game is not a security. Nobody's ever treated it like a security. But then if you make a blockchain token, excuse me, if you make a blockchain token and you try to sell somebody's some gold from a game in that, then all of a sudden they say, well, that's a security because it's a blockchain token. And so it's like there's
Well, yeah,
a
it would
bit
be
of,
a security because it would be based on World of Warcraft. So if World of Warcraft didn't exist, then that would have no value at all.
well, the same with Decentraland, but even still, they still say, or well, I guess I don't know if they would argue.
It's definitely a
There's
security.
different
It's issued by a
there's
central
different
source.
camps. And this is a whole other rabbit hole that I don't know that you know because there's lawyers that you could talk to that'll say that a lot of these things aren't securities, and there's other lawyers that just say everything is a security. So it's going to be contested. Each one, like the Decentraland, is you know if it comes down to, it, will have to have their own court battle for their own tokens. Until they make a more solid framework that doesn't yet exist. But I think if
So
they did
basically,
make that
they're
framework,
basically they're using Binance as a cover to cover their own asses, basically.
I mean, maybe not even intentionally. Binance exists. It works. People use it. People like it.
But
It's
also, they would
providing
surely World of Warcraft wouldn't be issuing tokens and stuff like that if they weren't profiting from it in some way.
right. And World of Warcraft profits from WoW Gold just in a different way.
So
They charge you
they
per
want to
month.
do they want to offer this service in order to make themselves money, but in order to cover their own asses, they want to use Binance. So like Binance is like an agency for them almost.
And it's also got a lot more liquidity there. So, maybe if you make your own little exchange, nobody uses it. So
Yeah, but they'll
it's
use it
not.
if they want to use World of Warcraft and buy World of Warcraft gold.
Sure, I agree with you.
But they don't want to
But I
do it that
also,
way because
but I
they'll get in
also like.
trouble with the SEC directly.
I think that I do think the SEC has a lot of fault here as well, because the securities laws are not made for 2020. When they made those securities laws, it was like, I don't know, like 19 a long time ago, and
Well,
depending on which law.
they still seem pretty clear to me though. If
Well,
you're a
but the
central
point
point
of
of
them, so
authority issuing a
they
token,
never
that's a
thought that
security.
somebody would want to take the securities instrument and use that securities instrument to power parts of their farm. Like, imagine if your tractor was a security and had to follow securities laws. Like, you wouldn't be allowed to talk about your tractor a certain way. You wouldn't be allowed to use your tractor in certain ways. It would have all these ridiculous restrictions around it. But of course, they would never think that a tractor would be a
Yeah, but a
security.
tractor is a
But in the,
product.
but in the case of some of these tokens, they also are a product, but they're being treated like security. And in some case, there is a little bit of overlap
How
because,
can a token be a product?
um, for example, in Decentraland, or the token is, you get this token and it can represent land, so that you can buy land with it
Oh, so it's like
in
a
the
digital
game,
asset.
in the video game.
Yeah,
So, or like maybe the token is an NFC, which is like a collectible,
but that would still be a security because it's it's a
because it's
digital
acting as an
representing something.
investment, would be the argument. So there's four prongs
Yeah,
of
it'd still be a
security
security.
typically. It's common enterprise, which means there's a company behind it. Basically, there's an expectation of profit, which means you bought this thing because you thought it was going to be worth more money later. Um, the other third prong would be this enterprise. Somebody has convinced you that they are going to work to make this thing more valuable.
Well, that sounds
So, like,
right. If
buy
you're
this
buying
thing.
land in Decentraland, then
Yeah. So
the only you wouldn't you wouldn't buy it if you're going to lose money.
exactly. So yeah, I'm agreeing that according to the way we measure whether or not something is a security, you can make a good argument that most of these tokens are securities. Problem is, the reason why we made these securities laws in the first place to protect certain things from happening need to be more broad to cover the new use cases that exist now with these digital
What are
properties.
the new use cases? It just sounds like they're buying these tokens to represent digital securities but they're still buying
Well,
for the same
for
reason, still
example, I'll give you a
drafting
good
value.
example. So I used to do, and still a little bit, but I don't like to do it as much because I've just become disillusioned with all the token stuff. But in 2017, I was doing a lot of consulting with startups that were doing blockchain companies, and there was this one company that came to me. I don't know. I guess if I don't give any too specific information, it's fine. Um, they had a large scale arcade business running in the United States, and with a big community across the country, and they wanted to, and so they already had a thing where when you play at their arcade, you get points, and the more points you get, you can trade those points in for prizes. Well, and they already had that, but they wanted to convert those points into a digital asset and make it to where people could keep it in their phone, and take it to the other stores and be able to transfer it. And they wanted to build a whole thing around the coin where like you could use it. They wanted to do like tournaments and stuff, and to where like when you play a lot and you collect a lot of coin, then you can spend that coin to like pay for your flights so that you can go to these tournaments and get into like admissions to the tournaments and blah blah blah.
Mm.
And so they consulted me for parts of it, and they also consulted attorneys for parts of it. And their attorneys basically told them that they would have to register as a security, and they didn't mind to do that. They were perfectly willing to register as security. They had a lot of money. This was a big budget project, and they wanted to do everything legal as possible. This is a business. They're not trying to scam people. They just want to be able to tokenize their their point system on their games. And so, with their lawyer's advice, they said, okay, we're going to have to make our tokens a security. But then the problem became that if they made the token a security, the individual players, the gamers, they can't trade securities amongst themselves. That's illegal because they would have to be a broker. So then they made it to where if they did do that, none of their customers would be allowed to trade with each other. And also, since they were securities, they would not be able to talk. So securities are also protected. With like I can't take a security and advertise it on TV the same way I can advertise a Big Mac because it's regulated, and the way you talk about securities is regulated. So they wouldn't be able to advertise their point system. They would have to cut off all the marketing about it unless you were like an institutional investor. They wouldn't be able to sell it to you without you filling out all kinds of complicated paperwork. Like when something becomes a security, it's not just a little notch on the SEC's checklist says okay, it's good. It also comes with a whole bunch of regulation and paperwork for every transaction and each person that uses it, and each person that touches it. And it basically they had to kill the project because the users can't be passing around securities to each other. It just wouldn't work. So it was a legitimate project where they wanted to comply by the law, but because of the way securities law is now, it just wasn't practical for this. You still there?
Yeah. I'm listening to what you're saying. Yeah, I'm thinking
So,
that if customers were trading that between each other, that would effectively be a medium exchange, and therefore it would be a currency, which
but it is owned by a company, and if the arcade dies, like you said, it would be worthless.
Right. Yeah, I can. Yeah, so they may as well just simply use money.
But they have already like a little point system, and they wanted to make it digital, and they just couldn't because the current laws. And so all I was saying before was, I think
It doesn't sound like
security
there would
laws.
be any need for it, because it sounds like if they were going to create that token security system that you were talking about, effectively they would be issuing it, they would have control of it, it would go up in value as more and more people used it, and then they could just simply close their doors one day and do an exit scam, which is
Sure,
what the SEC is trying to protect against.
they could do the same thing with their, with their virtual. World of Warcraft could do it with their gold. They'd be stupid of them to do it, but they could do it. They could all of a sudden
Well,
take
yeah,
everybody's.
they could be taken over. Like could I mean, if they were like listed as a publicly limited company, and you get an asset stripper who just goes, oh wow, look at the value of their token. What I can do is I can take over their company, sell all their tokens, and then offer one hostile takeover. I mean that's what the
The
SEC
same
is
thing
trying
can
to protect
happen.
people against.
But my only point is that there are lots of things that are not securities that could still happen to. Like a rare collectible. Let's say like a Babe Ruth baseball card. The company could decide to make a whole bunch more of them, and that would just kill the value of it. And it wouldn't be illegal if they did that.
Yeah, but that's like fraud, isn't it? Really, that's
I
counterfeiting.
mean, they're their own let's just say the company that made them wants to make more of them. It's their card. They didn't promise not to make more necessarily. I don't know. Maybe they did. Um, I'm just saying that these kinds of problems exist not even just with securities, but with anything technically. And you can't. I don't think. All I'm saying is I think that the securities laws could be modernized so that projects like that arcade could use those tokens and without having to do all the nonsense that like a share in a company has to go through.
Yeah,
And
but the thing is, if you allow people like that, that arcade, to do that token system, then you're opening the system up to exit scammers, and like they're the first people that go in. They're criminals are opportunists. They will see
I
that
think
straight away.
to prevent an exit scam,
Yeah,
um, I don't think we need. So we need regulation. That's true. There needs to be regulation, and we both agree about that. The only thing we disagree on, I guess, is what the regulation is. So I think that if you had to basically, if you're creating a token that you're going to sell to people, then you have to be KYC'd and in a book somewhere. So the owner of that arcade, the one that's responsible for, that company, he needs to be verified and in a book that says this is me, this is my token, and I'm a real person, and my person is behind this. And that in itself, without all the other nonsense about needing brokers and this and that and everything else, would stop 99% of exit scams, because now there has to be a person associated, a real person associated with the token. Right now, if you make BitConnect, you don't have to tell anybody who you are. Nobody knows who you are. If you take all the money, you can just run with it. But if you have to be in a book somewhere to sell token and you're real with your real identity, in the government, in some government agencies, eyeballs, then if you defraud everyone, they'll just come and arrest you.
But then they would just simply use a shell company.
I mean, you have to make the regulations work, just like anything else. So if you think people are going to use a shell company and that becomes an issue, well, you have to design your law to take that into account and say, we want a person. You can make that. You can make a law say whatever you want. So
the thing is, though, I'm still thinking about what criminals would do, because, like I said, they'll grab this and run. Let's say somebody, you make someone responsible, right? So they can't use shell companies, and then that one person is responsible for it. Then suddenly that one person becomes extremely valuable, and then they're leaving a will to their family, and their family goes, "Oh, he's worth quite a lot of money. Let's knock him off." Boom, and then again, everyone loses their money because what he owns then gets distributed to his estate.
The system we have now is the current securities law system, and guess what? Everybody violates it, and there's thousands of tokens out there that are not registered, and so criminals got around it pretty easy.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the law acts slowly. There's probably going to come for them. I don't think they're going to be, just because like a criminal robbed a store yesterday doesn't mean that he's going to be not arrested like today or next week.
And criminals do get more. There are criminals who do essentially not legally fraudulent securities, but securities which are bullshit and basically scams, but they're totally legal. Like all these little penny stocks, all these little penny stock companies that buy a bunch of PR, and they.
Yeah, but that's why SEC laws are there to.
They do, and they regulate kind of speech. Shit. And that's why those companies can't say certain things, but there's specific things they're not allowed to say, and so they'll say everything else they can to accomplish the same goal without using certain words or without breaking certain rules. And like you said, they find a way around it. That's just how criminals always.
Yeah, laws are but I mean, if they do actually find a loophole, then it's up to the law to make those, to close those loopholes. But
exactly, so that you can just use what you're saying.
The only reason people would have an issue with it is if they felt they've been ripped off unfairly.
Sure. So exactly what you're saying. If people violate the current securities laws, find a loophole, then they'll update the law, and cat and mouse forever. The same logic applies to what I was saying before about more practical ways of regulating token issuers. If people are taking advantage of it and criminals find ways to get around it, then you got to change the rules.
Yeah.
But I think that's
interesting. This has come down. It's interesting that the topic of conversation has gone on to regulation, and that we sort of like agree that it's needed.
Yeah, especially with the shitty tokens, because there are a lot of scammers.
Yeah, there are a lot of scammers.
But I would just disagree a little, because I don't think current SEC rules are smart enough. I don't think they take into account this new technology, and I think that they should have, a long time ago, 2 years ago, started modernizing those rules to take into account the real problem, which is all these anonymous people selling people things and then taking the money. Like there's
people things. What?
Well, tokens. So, people saying, "Hey, this is a great token. You should buy it. It's going to be worth a lot of money."
Oh yeah, but there are people being arrested for that already.
There are, yeah, but most of those people, ironically, are the ones who are getting in trouble now. The most are the ones who did it with lawyers and tried to do it, kind of on the books. Like all the big ones that we see getting shut down, they were on the books. I can't think of a single one that wasn't on the books that got shut down before it exit scammed.
But they would
Uh,
only be shut down if they'd actually, yeah, if other people had genuinely lost money and were bereaved on what they had done, and
well,
therefore
for
wanted
example,
compensation.
BitConnect got away with their exit scam. They got all, maybe even billions of dollars. The one token, was it the, is it called
Oh
one
well,
token?
yeah, one coin. Oh my god, yeah.
One coin. They got all their money out.
Well,
Um,
yeah,
the
but
other
the
one,
law is after them.
but none of these guys have ever been arrested that I know of.
Yeah, because they can't find them.
Exactly.
I mean,
So that's the
that
problem. We're
that
dealing with,
woman, Dr. Ruger, she's meant to have had plastic surgery and all sorts. Yeah, she's on
who
the
knows?
run.
Yeah. So hopefully we start seeing some of these guys actually get arrested. But the only ones who actually they're actually getting enforced on right now are the ones that kind of trying to do it on paper a little bit,
Yeah, but
because
they're doing it wrong. They're ripping people off.
all the ones that did it just didn't care. The biggest criminals, they've all seems like gone away with it so far.
So far, yeah. I guess, I mean, the landscape is changing all the time. So I guess we'll see. But I'm just looking at the time here. So we've actually been going for 1 hour 25 minutes. This has been a fascinating conversation. I have to say I really appreciate you coming on the show. This has been great. I would love to actually chat again in the future
We
because
can.
we've covered a lot of ground here. But just as kind of I suppose conclude in the fact that you said that there's obviously when you were saying there's lots of things wrong with BTC, and chances are there is room in the market for something else to come along and fix all of its problems.
Let's not. I mean, that's already the way it is now. So there are already today. There are choices people can make if they don't like what BTC is. There's like more than 2,000 choices that they can choose today. It's not something that is happening in the future. It's something that is now. So
Mm.
if people don't like to pay the higher fee, or they don't want to use stuff like Lightning, which I find to be very easy to use, I'd like to use it with you. If you don't have time today, then another day where I can send you money there,
Oh,
and
great! Yeah, yeah. Let's do another show. That'd be fun. Well, we could do a show on it. You like sending me a Lightning transaction?
yeah, and you will do it from the ground up, as if I met you, on the street.
All
Say,
right,
hey,
great.
you want some Bitcoin, and just right there on the spot, download the. I'll tell you how to download the wallet. You can pretend like you're a grandma, like you don't know anything about Bitcoin, and I'll show you how easy it can be for, can a grandma use Lightning? We'll see. Um,
That would be great. I'll definitely be up for that. Definitely, that sounds really good. I would love that. Yeah, that's great.
so
And then we've
uh,
concluded that BCH basically are in no man's land. Nobody really gives the monkeys
I
about
don't
that.
understand them. Yeah,
And
they're getting taken over.
and BSV, you still got lots of questions on.
Well, I've actually used, because I like to, if I'm going to talk about something, I try to use it so I know what I'm talking about a little bit. So I've used a lot of the apps on BSV. I've used Handcash before they started asking for phone numbers. I really don't like that. I've used my wallet right now is simply.cash. So I'm JC
All right.
Crown
Yeah.
at simply.cash.
Great.
Um, I do like that one because it's just very simple, and um, my BSV went up a little bit. I just have a few bucks. Somebody sent me the other day for something. Um, and I've used Twitch. I've used Bitstagram. I've used um, I can't remember now. It's been time's flying. It's almost been like 8 months since I did this stuff. Um, I've used a lot of little. Whenever somebody tells me there's something cool,
Mm.
I check it out, because I'm
Oh,
not gonna
and
say
have you
it's not
tried
cool.
let me think. SentB, Read
Yeah,
Money Button. Have you used that one?
money button's on everything. You can't use BSC without using money button, because it's basically everywhere. Um, and then Ryan doesn't like me because on Telegram, a lot of people know that I often speak against um, BSV's inefficiency, what I think is inefficiency, and also Craig Wright. There's a lot of people that don't like you if you don't like Craig Wright, and
So
I don't.
what do you find that's inefficient about BSV?
Trying to keep everything on a hard drive. Yeah, not everything needs to
How do you
be
mean on a hard drive?
well in the ledger. Ledger's on a hard
Yeah, but
drive.
the ledger is just a distributed network.
And it's a bunch of hard drives, a bunch of people with stuff on their
Yeah,
hard
but
drive,
it's distributed.
which means that you have to do it over and over again. That's why it's inefficient. So if I
Well,
buy
yeah, but
some
how
coffee,
do you mean it's inefficient?
because if I want to buy coffee with BSV, then we have to get everybody with the BSV network to store that transaction in their computer on their hard drive
No,
for the rest
well, yeah,
of the
but it
time.
goes into data centers.
Yeah, but those are, normally, like let's say if I use Cash App, it's just going to go in their little backup server and archive there, and they'll probably purge it in who knows how many years. And they're not going to like store my coffee transaction on a million computers all around the world because it's not.
But if you just simply you want to make a transaction, if that network can scale for something like 3 million transactions a second, and everybody starts using it, that's a hugely efficient system.
No, I mean you could say, let's just say that it was able to handle 3 million transactions a second. That doesn't necessarily mean it's efficient. That just means it's fast and it works well.
Well, yeah, but
But
fast and working well means it's chances are that's
well, wait,
efficient.
no, under the hood it could be much more expensive than it would be just to, for example, use my computer right now.
Yeah, but
Um,
it gets better value at scale.
if I put a database on my computer and I make it public, and people can all together come and add entries to my database, I got a really fast internet, so it'd be really fast. It'd be faster than if I had to do the same thing, but with computers all around the world. It's just like common sense. If you just have to connect with one computer, it's faster than having to connect with 100 computers.
Yeah, but
There's
if
no way
all
around
those
that.
hundreds of computers are on one single small world network, yeah, the
It's
access
still
is
faster
instant.
to do one than it is to do 100, even if they're on a very efficient
Yeah, but the
network. It's
network
still
has to
faster
scale
to do one.
for everybody to use. So there's you have to do something.
No, one computer,
You can't
one
have it on one
computer scales
computer.
better.
But if it was on one
Yeah,
computer, then that computer would be the system's vulnerability. So all you got to do is take that
sure, of course.
computer out, and it doesn't exist anymore.
No, that's true. But we're talking about efficiency. So you're talking about, so there's security and then there's efficiency.
Well, yeah, it
Um,
has to be a balance between the two.
sure. So if we're just using my computer, it's less secure, but mm, one computer could scale faster or better
But that's
than
one
a bunch of
computer.
computers.
You've got a central point of
Sure.
authority there, which means the data would be vulnerable.
But for a what? Sorry, my wife is. I'm on a show, but I do want to. I'll look at it in a minute. That's awesome. Though. Freaked out because we had some dogs
Oh
that
yeah.
we rescued, and we when they were just newborn, and my son needs a lot of work, so unfortunately we had to find them a new home. So we found them a new home, but it's 2 hours away, and she just saw some pictures of them. It's been like a couple of years since we've seen them. So she got really excited and had to tell me that she saw some pictures of them. And I'll look at the pictures. I want to see them, but not right now. So anyway, yeah. So my only point, and I'm not arguing with you. I know that,
Well,
of course,
just quickly
more
then. I mean, were there
secure.
any BSV apps that you didn't like? 'Cause, I mean, apart from saying that you thought the system was inefficient, which
Um,
we can discuss again another time, was there any apps that you
sure.
thought you didn't work or didn't like?
I mean, well, like is subject. I might not have a use for something, and somebody else might. Centbee was my least favorite wallet, I think, just because it seemed a little slow. Just not very slow, but just
When
when you
did you
open
use that? They've updated that now.
no, I haven't used it since, so maybe it's faster now. Um, but it looked good. It looked really pretty, actually, better than the others.
Yeah,
But
no,
maybe that's
it's even
why.
better now. It's really good. But I mean,
Maybe that's
was there
why.
anything that any app that you didn't like or that you thought was useless or something like that?
I mean, um, so I use the Gat gun. Actually, I
Oh, the
sometimes I'll
Gatling gun.
donate. Yeah, sometimes I'll donate. Like, I like that guy. What's his name? Kurt.
Kurt Wotterk.
Uh huh. Sometimes he asks on Twitter if anybody wants to donate or if anyone wants to do the GAC gun, and sometimes I donate money to him to do it, um, because I feel like the best way to show um, the things I don't like about BSV is to fill up the ledger as much as possible.
And has that worked so far?
Well, no, because it's still not as big as BTC yet. We got to get it bigger. Um, you know, I just mean that the ledger, the total size of the ledger is still significantly smaller than BTC. It's finally gotten to where it's more transactions than BTC, but it's still smaller. So we got to get it bigger. We got to make the thing as big as possible.
Oh, right. Right. I tell you what, then, Crown, I've just had a call through from a plumber who wants to do some work for me and stuff.
Okay, I know you're busy. I've kept you a long time.
No, this has been great. I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed this. Honestly, I genuinely have. You know, having a conversation with somebody who has actually got answers that we can discuss. You know, because you'll be surprised. I mean, you're the first, you know, technical BTC that's actually sort of like reached out and said, yeah, I'll have a chat with you. Yeah, so I can actually sort of put my answers to them. Whereas with most people, you know, when you if you ask them a question, you know, they get defensive about it. You know, either because they don't know the answer or they think that you're challenging them, and it's just like, well, how are you meant to know these things? You know, you can't sort of like look in a book somewhere. It's not written everywhere. And you know, Andreas Antonopoulos was saying that he wrote his book based on what other people told him. So I mean, they could have told him a crock of shit, and that's what he's written his book on. You know?
That's why you gotta run the network yourself, so to speak. But, all right, well, it's great. We'll talk another time. Just let me know, and maybe send me a link to the show, I guess.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll get this up later this afternoon.
Okay, great.
Right.
Do you have like do you play like a certain time every day, and then people come and watch at a certain time, or?
No. I just simply upload it, and people can watch it as and when.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, been a pleasure. Speak to you soon, hopefully.
You too. Mm-hmm.
See you later. Cheers. Bye.